Audio Jungle.
In the heart of Tembisa, where the nights buzz with the sound of idling taxis and the days are filled with the shouts of hawkers and commuters rushing to make a living, a legend was born. His story does not begin with wealth, privilege, or powerful connections. It begins with dust, diesel fumes, and the restless heartbeat of a township built on survival. Bafana Sindane grew up like many young men in the East Rand, surrounded by the hard realities of township life. Jobs were scarce. Opportunities were limited. You survived by being quick, by thinking fast, and by learning how to navigate the invisible rules that govern the streets. Even as a boy, people say he had a presence, a way of standing, observing, and calculating before making a move. That is a skill that would later build him an empire. His entry into the taxi world was humble. No fancy introductions. No inheritance. Just a young, determined man who needed to put food on the table. He started as a taxi driver, waking up before dawn, long before the first streak of sunlight touched the East Rand sky. It was a tough life. Every day was a battle for passengers, for routes, for peace, and sometimes even for safety. But unbeknownst to many, these early days were shaping him. Teaching him the rhythms of the business. Showing him where money flowed. Where influence lived. Where danger lurked. And above all, where real power could be built. Bafana didn't just drive a taxi, he studied the industry. He observed the conflicts, the alliances, the politics that moved behind the scenes. He learned which routes paid well, which people made decisions, and which personalities controlled the flow of business. Taxi ranks are like kingdoms, and he was studying the blueprint of a throne he intended to sit on. Soon, he saved enough money to operate a taxi. Then to own one. That first taxi became 2. 2 became 5. And before anyone realized what was happening, he was no longer just a driver. He was a businessman. A strategist. A force. But his true rise began when he entered the battlefield known as the Sky Route, one of Gauteng's most profitable and competitive corridors. Sky wasn't just a route. It was a symbol of dominance controlling movement between Tembisa, Kempton Park, and the Johannesburg CBD. Those who controlled Sky controlled millions in commuter revenue. It was the crown jewel of the East Rand. And Bafana Sindane took it. Not by luck. Not by chance. But by sheer strategy, resilience, and fearlessness. From that moment, the nickname began to spread across taxi ranks, King of Sky. As his influence grew, so did the challenges. The taxi industry is not for the faint-hearted. It is an industry built on negotiations that can turn deadly, on alliances that can shift overnight, on disputes that can escalate from words to warfare. But Bafana managed these storms with a calmness that made people bow. And fear him. Those close to him say he didn't raise his voice often. He didn't make empty threats. His decisions were calculated, his movements silent, and his methods effective. Beyond the routes, he expanded his empire into multiple sectors. He invested in panel beating workshops, essential for fleets that are always on the road. He invested in fuel supply, ensuring that his taxi operations were not dependent on fluctuating petrol station prices. He entered logistics to move goods. He bought properties in Tembisa, Kempton Park, and parts of Germiston. He had interests in entertainment venues, taxis on multiple routes, and connections that extended to provincial taxi associations. What made him different was his understanding of power. He didn't just want money, he wanted influence. And influence came from owning assets that people needed. As his wealth grew, so did his reputation. In cash-heavy industries like taxis, net worth is difficult to track with precision. But analysts, insiders, and associates estimate his wealth between 80 million and 150 million, depending on the true size of his fleet, property interest, and side businesses. But behind the money, behind the fleet, behind the empire, there was a man shaped by survival. A man who understood that the taxi industry is a living organism. It rewards the strong. It punishes the careless. It destroys the unprepared. And only a few rise to the level where their names become urban legends. Bafana Sindane is one of those names. To some, he is a businessman. To others, a leader. To others, an enforcer. And to many, he is simply the man who carved an empire from nothing, the man who turned the Sky Route into his kingdom. His journey from driver to mogul is more than a business story. It is a story about the unseen kings of South Africa's informal economy, the men who keep the country moving, literally. Men whose empires are built far from corporate boardrooms, yet have more influence than many CEOs. Today, King of Sky remains a name that commands instant attention in the East Rand. A name that represents resilience, strategy, power, and legacy. Whether spoken with admiration, fear, or curiosity, the name Bafana Sindane continues to rise above the noise of engines and the chaos of taxi ranks. His legacy is not written in newspapers or financial magazines. It is written on the roads of Gauteng, in the endless movement of taxis that carry millions of South Africans to work, to school, to life. It is written in the stories whispered by drivers, queue marshals, rank managers, businessmen, and even political figures who once crossed paths with him. This is the life of a man who built an empire without investors, without corporate backing, and without waiting for permission. A man who saw opportunity in struggle, order in chaos, wealth in movement. A man who turned the sky into his throne.